Today in our live session, we are going to be learning how to do one-step equations with multiplication and division. Now, in order to solve them, just like we do when we add and subtract, you need to isolate the variable by using the inverse operation on both sides of the equation. This is so important, I underlined and highlighted. Now, what's the inverse operation? Well, the inverse operation of multiplication is division, so the inverse operation of division is multiplication. What you do to one side of the equation must be done to the other side. What you do to one side must be done to the other side. If you need to pause and write this down, go ahead and do that now. After you write it down, I want you to fold your paper in half. Fold it in half. Draw a line down the middle. Draw a line at the top. Cut it into thirds. We're going to draw a line into thirds so that we have 1, 2, 3 rows. Now what you're going to do is so you have 6 boxes right now. You're going to draw a line so that those boxes get cut in half. So you should have 4 boxes in the top and 3 boxes going down. I'm going to number it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So each one question has 2 small boxes, and you'll understand why in a minute. For number 1, 3x equals negative 15. Now, I have a 3 and an x. Well, I need to isolate my variable, and I do that by doing the inverse operation. Well, what operation is connecting my 3 and my x? Multiplication. So the inverse of multiplication is division. And to show division, remember, a fraction is the same as division. I'm going to draw a line straight down for my equal sign so that I can see that one side and the other side are the same. What I do to one side, I must do to the other side. I'm dividing the left side by 3, so I have to divide the right side by 3. If I have 3x and I'm divided by 3, my 3 over 3 becomes a 1. So all I have left over is my x and my equal sign. Negative 15 divided by a positive 3. We learned with our integers, negative divided by a positive gets me a negative answer. 15 divided by 3 is 5. So x equals negative 5. Now, this second little box, we are going to check our work. So you check by substitution. I'm going to write that down. Check by substitution. Okay, check by substitution. And that is also so important, I'm going to highlight. Now, I have a question for you. If you had a trick to guarantee you got the question right, would you use that trick every single time? Absolutely you would. It takes 2 extra seconds to guarantee that you got that question right. I'm going to show you how you do that. We said that x equaled negative 5. So instead of writing 3x equals negative 15, I'm going to write 3 times negative 5 equals negative 15. So I substituted my 5 in for my x. My x is what started, my negative 5 is what's going in. Well, what's 3 times negative 5? Don't look at this side. I want you to actually do the math. What's 3 times negative 5? That equals negative 15. Bring down the other side. Does negative 15 actually equal negative 15? Yes, it does. Check. You're done. That's how you check by substitution. Number 2. X divided by 8 equals negative 16. I have division. I need to do my inverse operation, and the inverse of division is multiplication. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 8. Don't forget to draw your line straight down so that you remember what you do to one side, you have to do to the other. If I'm dividing and multiplying, those cancel each other out. I bring down my x. Negative 16 times 8. we know is a negative 128. So x equals 128, negative 128. Now I'm going to substitute. Negative 128 divided by 8 should equal a negative 16. Well, do side math. Does it equal negative 16? Absolutely it does. Check, we got it right. Take the time to do the substitution for the check. Like I said, those extra 2 seconds are worth getting it correct. Number 3. Negative 0 and 7/10 x equals 0 and 56/100. Going to draw my line down. I need to divide because I have multiplication here. So I'm going to divide. Divide by a negative 0 and 7/10. Divide by a negative 0 and 7/10. X equals negative 0.8. Check your work. Substitution. Negative 0.7 times negative 0.8. Does that equal 0 and 56/100? Well, do the math. 0 and 56/100 does equal 0 and 56/100. Number 4. Now we're going to move into a little bit harder. We have x over 6 is equal to negative 18. Well, if I have an x over 6, that's a fraction, right? Fraction is the same as what operation? Division. So to eliminate this division, I need to multiply. And what I do to one side, I must do to the other. So I'm going to multiply it by a 6 over 1, or just multiply it by 6. That cancels out. I get an x. Multiply it by 6. Negative 18 times a positive 6 equals a negative 108. To check my work, I'm going to substitute. So instead of x over 6, it's going to be a negative 108 over a positive 6, and that needs to equal a negative 18. Well, do the math. Negative 108 divided by 6 does in fact equal negative 18, which equals negative 18. Boom, we are finished. Remember, you can pause if I'm going too quickly. Number 5. Fractions. 1/5 x equals 1/10. Now don't let this fool you. I have a fraction of 1/5 and I'm multiplying that fraction by my x. Okay, so I have 1/5 times x. Well, to get rid of that multiplication, I need to divide. So I need to divide both sides by a 1/5. So I'm going to divide by 1/5. Now remember, when I'm dividing a fraction, 1/5 divided by 1/5, I keep change reciprocal, or I keep change opposite. Okay? So that's really going to be, let me switch colors so you can see it. That's really going to be 1/5 times 5 over 1. 1/5 times 5 over 1. And those cancel each other out. Okay? Same thing here. 1/10 divided by 1/5. That's really 1/10 times 5 over 1. 1/10 times 5 over 1. I can cross simplify and I end up with 1/2. X equals a positive 1/2. Now in the future, I'm going to rewrite this problem again. Okay, I'm going to draw a line and I'm going to rewrite the same problem. 1/5 x equals 1/10. Instead of dividing by a 1/5 and then having to keep change reciprocal or keep change flip, I can go ahead and do that anyway. And by doing that, I'm just going to multiply by a 5 over 1 on both sides, times 5 over 1 on both sides. Okay, so that was my second step that I did up here, but I went ahead and moved it to my first step. Those two cancel out. Simplify, 1/2. X equals 1/2. So if you see that by multiplying it by 5 or by multiplying it by its reciprocal, you get the same answer, go ahead and do that. If you don't see that, take the time to write out the division. That is fine. But let's go ahead and check our work. 1/5 times 1/2 should equal 1/10. Well, 1 times 1 is 1, 5 times 2 is 10. That does indeed equal 1/10. And our last one, number 6, -2 3/6 should equal -3x. Now, all of our other 5 examples, our variable was on the left side of the equation. This one is on the right side of the equation. That doesn't matter. It does not matter if it's on the right side or the left side. You do the same thing. So I have multiplication connecting my -3 and my x. So I'm going to divide. Divide by a -3. Divide by a -3. Those cancel each other out, and I get an x. I need to figure out what -3/6 divided by -3 equals. Well, I need to change this into a mixed number. 6 times 2 is 12, plus 3 is 15. So I have -15 over 3. Oh, I'm sorry. -15 over 6 times a -1/3. Because remember, I'm reciprocaling. Cross simplify. 1, 5. Now I can multiply across. -5 times -1 is 5. 6 times 1 is 6. Negative times a negative gets me a positive. So my answer is positive 5/6. Now I'm going to check my work. -2 3/6 should equal -3 times 5/6. -3 over 1 times 5 over 6. Cross simplify, they both get divided by 3, so that's a 1 and that's a 2. 5 times 1 5 times -1 is -5. 2 times 1 is 2. I do have -5 over 2, but I need to figure out if that equals 2 3/6. Well, that's an improper fraction. 2 goes into -5, or 2 goes into 5 2 times, with 1 left over. So far they're not the same. But let's simplify this one, because this one's not simplified. I can divide by 2. -2 and 1/2. Does that equal -2 and 1/2? Absolutely. Move on and work on the practice.